How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to AZ Trading. This will be a new series of video. I'm not sure how often I'll make these ones, but this will be the first. So please let me know if you find this type of video helpful in the comments below. So the trade here on screen was taken a few days ago on Tuesday by a member of our community, and they managed to capture over 100 points on the Dow Jones, and they've also provided the proof and the executions as well. So I'll just run that clip. So you just saw in that video that they had a very precise sniper entry going through only a couple points of drawdown, and they've taken a couple partials along the way, 20% at each objective, leaving 60% of their position to run and protecting their stop loss at break even and eventually getting stopped out. But I would say that this is a very successful and well-found trade. And so for this trade, there are three main topics that I'd like to cover. And the most important topic that I'd like to cover is the daily bias. So stick around for that. Since for this trade, the trader that took this actually had a bearish daily bias. However, they saw this bullish trade forming, which was against their bias, although still decided to take that trade. So I have a very interesting and informative point about daily bias once we get to that topic. But first, let's hop into the replay function to see exactly which RMR pattern that they saw that allowed them to capture such a precise entry. So we'll just start our replay before the equity open, so around 9:25. And just before we go into the RMR pattern, we'll do a very quick sentiment analysis, because this will give us an idea of what the majority of retail traders are seeing and what they're doing. So we'll just scroll back very briefly, and if I asked you guys what would the majority of traders be doing just with this piece of price action, is price obviously in an uptrend, is price in a range, or is price obviously in a downtrend? And if you have an eye or two, I'm sure you can realize that the sentiment or the trend is currently bearish. And because the sentiment is very bearish, most traders will be placing shorts, and since the sentiment is bearish, we can see that all these lows are being taken out, they're all being raided, and all these highs are being left untouched. So the liquidity above these highs are resting, meaning this will be a very likely objective. And on top of that, another way to visualize this is when retail places shorts. A lot of the times when they're trailing their stop loss, if they're not trailing it very aggressively, they'll be leaving it at swing highs. So at these swing highs, there'll be a lot of resting liquidity. So with just that in mind, looking for a bullish trade to break the sentiment or to take the liquidity created from the sentiment, we'll only be looking for bullish RMR patterns. So the equity market is just about to open at 9:30, and we'll be looking for a bullish RMR pattern. So I'm going to click that play button. Okay, I'm just going to pause it here, and at this point in time, there should be something that's sticking out like a sore thumb. It might not be the cleanest, but these are some relative equal lows over here. And not only that, you can see that this swing high over here. So if you imagine all these retail traders placing shorts with their stop loss covered at different swing highs, they would have been stopped over here. However, yes, this is the sentiment being broken, but if you have a look at this swing high over here, if I drew a line from this swing high to the left, you can see that this swing high actually made an equal high. And we all know that equal highs have a lot of resting liquidity above there, which makes it an even more likely objective. So even though we knew that the sentiment was bearish and we were expecting a pump to break a high to break the sentiment, yes, we can argue that the sentiment was broken over here, so price can freely just dump. However, the fact that price made an equal high as it was breaking the sentiment just shows that this area became a key area for price to reach later in the future. On the other hand, if this swing high pumped all the way up to here and didn't create an equal high with anything on the left, then it would be a much more likely scenario for price to just dump to the next key area of liquidity. So we've got some equal highs up here, we've got some equal lows down here. I'm just going to zoom through price a bit more. Okay, now we can see that price has raided those equal lows. This is the first part of the RMR pattern, and after the raid we look for a market structure shift. So we wait for a swing high to be broken, and you can see that after that raid we have a bullish market structure shift breaking this swing high. So I've just labeled that the market structure shift. And the final element of the RMR pattern is the return. So the return area is just how you apply your entry technique. And there are many entry techniques out there. The most common one I use is in the form of a gap. So you can see that we have a 1 minute gap right in here. Another entry method you could use is using an order block. So you have a large order block in here. And if you're not using a gap or an order block, you could be using a Fibonacci. So if I drew a fib from the bottom of the raid to the top of that market structure shift, I don't know when it's going to create its swing high. It might create it here, it might create it here, but as soon as that swing high is created, that's where I'll put the top of that fib. And when you're using this fib as your entry technique, a general rule of thumb is as long as price retraces under that 50% level, then you're participating at a discount in price, which is a fair price to long. There are many entry techniques, including breaker blocks, tapping off EMA lines, whatever you want to use, but these are the three main ones that I use. So just find what's easy for you and what fits your trading framework. In the case of this example, for this trade, the trader used a gap as their return entry method. So we'll wait for price to retrace. Okay, we've seen that price has retraced into that return area, and that's exactly where he placed his long entry. Now, as soon as you've placed your entry, you can't forget about your stop loss, which is at the bottom of the raid in this case. If you're feeling very aggressive, you could put it at the bottom of the return area. This would be if you're feeling very frisky, but in most cases, I like to keep it at the bottom of the raid. And finally, now we can start to look for partial objectives above. So you know, for his first partial, it was taken off at a gap over here, and his second partial was taken off at those equal highs that we saw over here. And once he did so, he reduced his stop loss to protect his position to break even, and as we know, in the end, his position got stopped out. But this would still be an overall winning trade. So excellent job finding this trade entry. If you guys just want a naked chart so you can outline the RMR yourselves, here you are. So we've just covered that community trade, and now we can move on to the juicy topic, which is the daily bias. And this will be a very interesting topic to talk about, since the trader that took this trade actually had a bearish bias. And here's an image that he sent to me that shows his thoughts for the day and his bearish bias that he had on indices. So over here, he's written that he has a bearish bias and he anticipates a move higher to go lower. So if I'm thinking what he's thinking, he anticipates a manipulation leg to go higher, a bullish manipulation leg before a larger bearish movement. And his bearish bias was aiming towards these higher time frame equal lows that you can see on the Nasdaq. And in hindsight, if he had followed his daily bias and looked for bearish trades targeting these large equal lows, you can see that his analysis would have played out quite handsomely. So if I asked you guys, if you are anticipating a bullish manipulation leg followed by a larger bearish move, which of these two trades would you like to participate on? I would imagine most of you would want to take part in the larger bearish move and wait for that manipulation to take place. So this is actually a pretty great example of what the importance of a bias is, because we know that inside this 1 minute chart area, there was a very clean 1 minute bullish RMR pattern that resulted in a winning trade with a very precise entry. However, if we go into this day with a bearish bias in mind and we only look for bearish RMRs, I'll just outline a bearish RMR that looks quite clean to me, and we can see that as the day progressed in the London Open, we have a raid on this swing high. You know, after the raid, we look for a market structure shift, so we break some swing lows. Then we have a bearish market structure shift. And finally, after that market structure shift, we wait for a return. And we've got a return gap right in here. So once price retraces into that return area, that's when we'll be able to place our shorts with our stop loss at the raid's high over here and objectives below. If we took off our final objective as soon as Nasdaq reached these equal lows around 11 o'clock, 11:15, here on the Dow at 11 o'clock, 11:15, you can see that this trade would have been a banger of a trade. And here on the lower time frame, you can see we had that 15-minute raid, 15-minute shift, and we had that 15-minute gap return. This entry would have also been through a very small amount of drawdown, and you would have captured a much larger bearish move. So this is a great example that shows when you have a bias that's developed from liquidity, so those higher time frame equal lows on the Nasdaq, your bias is based on logic. So when you're trading against your bias, you're most likely trading a short-term manipulation leg rather than that expansion leg. Although both trades would have came out as a win, but the main point is when you have a bias that you've developed based on logic and liquidity over a consistently long period of time, when you follow your bias rather than trading against your bias, you're more likely for trades to pan out. And just for a little fun, we'll go into this 15-minute RMR and we can also see some lower time frame RMRs as well. So if we use the same raid above these equal highs and we look for a short-term market structure shift, we have a short-term shift below this low, we have a short-term shift below this low. We also look for short-term return areas. So during those shifts, we also have gaps over here. We have a gap up here, and we also have a gap over here. So within this higher time frame RMR pattern, we can also see two very lower time frame RMR patterns that also give very, very precise entries. And if you had your entry here, your stop loss at the top of the raid and objectives, same thing, timed with the equal lows on the Nasdaq, you can see that this trade over here would have given a slightly better entry. However, you would have to go through much more drawdown, waiting for the equity open before that main move takes place. And just a quick message on relative strength. If we took a short at this time at 10:30, how would we decide which index to participate on? Should we short on the Dow? Should we short on the S&P or the Nasdaq? And a very easy way you can find out is just drawing a fib from the top of that raid to the bottom of that swing over here, which creates that return. And you can see that price has retraced just to that 80% level on the Dow. Here on the S&P, same fib, top of the raid, bottom of the swing down here, price has retraced to 70%. So Dow is at 80 and S&P is at 70, which means that the S&P at that time was weaker than the Dow. And finally, here on the Nasdaq, same fib, top of the raid, bottom of the swing, and Nasdaq has retraced only to 50%. So Nasdaq around 50, S&P around 70, and Dow around 80%. So this clearly shows that the Nasdaq is much weaker than the other indices. So here on the Dow, if we had a bearish RMR pattern forming and we were looking to enter right over here at 10:30, instead of placing our entry on the Dow and over here on the Nasdaq, we'd place our short at 10:30 instead of on the Dow. Alright guys, that pretty much covers it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the topics that we covered and found it informative. And in my next video, I'll be talking about a trade that I placed on the S&P on Wednesday over here. And you can see that no, we didn't take part in this massive bullish move to some very key areas, but we did manage to capture a bearish move using the exact same pattern, the RMR pattern, which is very, very clean. But this will be a trade that I cover in my next video. Alright everybody, thank you all so much for watching, and thank you to the trader that helped me come up with this idea to showcase their trades and comment on their decisions. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And since it's the first time I'm making this type of video, leave a comment on what you think of these types of videos. That would be very helpful. But until next time, take care everyone. Peace.